Hello. This week's book is this one. Is that showing you backwards? Yeah. It's Pam Grout. It's a book called E Squared. And the subtitle is 9 Do-It-Yourself Energy Experiments That Prove Your Thoughts Create Your Reality. Okay. Why am I reading this book? Well, manifesting has been a bit of a thing recently in the ether, and I wanted to explore it, partly because of that and partly because my own mindfulness practice has got to a point where I'm thinking, is there really anything in this? Is it time to surrender? And the title and the layout of the book appeals to my rational side, in that it claims to be a kind of experimental manual on demonstrating to yourself that there is such a thing as a kind of something that responds to your thoughts. So first of all, I'm going to say I went into this book with a large amount of skepticism, and also with a kind of understanding that there are quite a lot of things where our thoughts do create what appears to be our reality. Like, for example, projection, where we have thoughts about ourselves that we attribute to other people, and unconscious motivations that trip us up, and we can see it every day in the people around us. That there was somebody the other day who what was it? They were kind of they kind of didn't have any idea that human beings could actually choose to be nice to each other for the sake of it, rather than because it would be to their immediate benefit. And I remember thinking, what a bleak world they must live in. And at the same time, my dear soulmate will tell you that there are times when I misinterpret what he says, even though it's not even very ambiguous, in the light of my own expectations. And and there are also that as a psychiatrist, there have been multiple occasions where I have noticed that essentially the same experiences are interpreted in different ways. So somebody who is brought up in the Catholic Church may see their like good and bad auditory hallucinations as being God and the devil on their shoulders arguing with each other, and somebody who is has grown up with American TV may may interpret them differently as the CIA somehow trying to put thoughts in their head, or the royal family training them up to be some kind of spy for them. So that those kind of things suggest that there's something about us that kind of predates our sensations. Okay. You can call it a filter, but calling it a filter suggests that the sensation is coming through the filter to us. But I think it's more that the filter is first and then the sensation. But whichever it is, this is the kind of area that we're talking about, that this book is talking about. Okay. So let's see. So, and it's been republished not very long ago for its 10th anniversary, and there's a preface. So the first thing that she says is, in the book, after the preface, the introduction, is a quote from someone called Neville Goddard, a Barbadian author and mystic. And the quote is, "Man's chief delusion is his conviction that there are causes other than his own state of consciousness." So, which is not very far away from the Buddha quote that goes something like, our life is a consequence of our thoughts. So, and I'm not saying either of them are right, okay? I'm just saying, two very disparate people saying approximately the same thing. Let's see. Right. So, and she goes into quantum physics a bit as a kind of, at last, science has caught up with what religion and contemplative wisdom paths already knew, which I am going to, for the time being, disregard, because it's easy to use scientific hypotheses as a metaphor for things that, and it's difficult to know whether that's useful. So I'm going to say her idea is that you can't know something is true just by thinking about it. You have to, or reading about it, you have to actually experience it, and that this is effectively the scientific method. And so she sets out the book as a series of how many lab experiments? 9 lab experiments on different spiritual principles that you, reading the book, are supposed to do and record your results. Okay. So, which appeals to me as an exercise, and so I'm going to do it. So the first thingamabob strong suggestion is that in order for this to have any possibility of working, one has to let go of what we think we know, in order not to be brainwashed, but to be able to see other possibilities, so that we can do this experiment at all. Okay, so that's a way of saying it. That's so from a scientific point of view, you have to stop believing the classic paradigm for long enough to come up with an experiment which is then able to disprove, you know, your hypothesis. So that's what Einstein did with Newton's laws. So Newton's laws were absolutely fixed in stone, and then there were some indications that maybe they weren't quite covering everything, and Einstein came up with some kind of ideas about how places where situations where they might not work, and so he let go of the idea that they were always true, and therefore he was able to consider that, you know, what if they're not always true? What could take their place? And so that's what's going on here. So the first hypothesis is called the dude abides principle. Okay, so the dude from the point of view of The Big Lebowski, which is a film which is very amusing, and a classic Coen Brothers film to be recommended. But so he calls God, or whatever it is that we call God, he calls him the dude. And so now I need to say, there is a long section in this book about how God probably isn't what you think he is. He isn't a he at all. He's an it. He's a force field, some kind of natural law like gravity, that I suppose you could say answers our prayers. So, okay, so I don't know about this, okay? All I know, what I want to test, is whether it is true that there is a natural consequence to my thinking in a particular way. And I don't actually need to know whether that's because there is a spiritual being, if it works. Okay, so I'm thinking, if there is some kind of magic to my intention, then in fact God doesn't have to come into it at all. Okay, I don't know if you can understand what I'm saying. God doesn't have to come into it at all. It could simply be a consequence of the way our brains work, you know, that the way human beings work, that if we go about thinking about something in a particular way, then it changes things. And yeah, so that's what I'm after, is some kind of demonstration that that's true, and some more information about how that might be. Okay, I don't know if that's what the intention. In fact, I think the intention of the book is to be a bit more sure, to start. You know, she seems to be sure about what's going to happen and why it's going to happen. But to me, it's this is an experiment that I will, as any good scientist, I will draw my own conclusions when I've got the results in. Okay. So the dude abides principle. basically it says there is an invisible energy force or field of infinite possibilities, and we're going to give the force exactly 48 hours to make its presence known, and I'm going to demand a clear, unmistakable sign that cannot be written off as coincidence. So, worth a try, eh? So, so to put this into details, she gives a kind of explanation of what she means by intention. So here, your intention is to understand that the way my brain was created was to narrow down what comes in. So there's a period during early childhood when all like loads and loads of brain cells are produced and link up in response to experience, and then there's a moment, a time in child development when all the brain cells that were linked up, that were not linked up, die. They are weeded away, and so you're only left with the brain that was reinforced by your reality when you were really very, very young. And I can't even remember exactly the ages, but it's something like up to the age of 5 or even less. So your entire life, it's not just a kind of psychoanalyst's wet dream. It's actually got a physical basis that your entire life is, to an extent, dictated by the boundaries that were put on your actual physical brain in your first years of toddlerdom. Okay, so which is interesting, and it suggests that there are a lot of possibilities that could be there, could be present, lot of possible different things, opportunities, feelings, ways of pronouncing words, lots of different possibilities that we can't even see because our brain is too narrow, if you see what I mean. Okay, so she says that, except without the brain development stuff. So yeah, so she's saying, don't give airtime to the reality that you're trying to escape. So she's saying, let's not allow our minds to dwell in the place we're trying to escape. Let's keep an open mind. Let's keep our minds on the experiment as much as we can. And so she's kind of talking about it like it's a different television channel, or I suppose a radio channel. That while you're listening to a particular radio channel, you can't be listening to another one. So she's saying, well, you have a tendency to keep going back to the original, to Radio 4. So whenever you find yourself slipping back into Radio 4 during this experiment, gently lead yourself back to Radio X. Okay. So at the end of the chapter 1, experiment number 1. The dude abides principle. The hypothesis is that there's a 24/7 energy force equally available to everyone, which I can access at any time simply by paying attention to it. Furthermore, if I ask this force for a blessing, giving it a specific time frame and clear instructions, it will send me a gift and say, my pleasure. Okay, so I've got to say, she has a sense of humour. So a lot of this is delivered not in the kind of weird discursive way that I do it, but in the amusing way that a popular journalist would deliver it. Okay, and the other thing is that she uses words like a blessing, a gift, which I'm slightly uncomfortable with because I'm being a scientist about this. But I'm going to go for it. Okay. So what you have to do is you have to make a page for the lab report of your experiment. You write today's date and time, which is Monday 2:20. The deadline for receiving the gift is Wednesday at 2:30, 48 hours. And what you have to do is have to say, I am giving you exactly 48 hours to make your presence known. I want a clear sign, something that cannot be written off as coincidence. And considering I'm really good at writing things off as a coincidence, it better be very clear. Okay? And that's it. So, let's see what happens. So my job is to keep my attention on this experiment, that my intention to receive a sign in the next 48 hours. So watch this space.